As we approach the very end of the liturgical year, the church has several readings about the end of the world and the judgment and things like that. We hear in our gospel today about you better be ready, because we don't know when the master's coming back. We just don't know. He could come back about 12:30 today. I don't think that might happen, but it could. And it might be 100 or 1,000 years from now. That we don't know. But the day will come. When that comes, we have to be ready. And so there's some things we could think about how to get ready. During the Nazi scourge through Europe, many Christians' families were really put to the test. It was a very difficult time. There's a family by the name of the Postma, and he was a father and 2 children, so they had 3 persons there, and it was in Holland, and it wasn't really a terrible persecution at the beginning, and not too much in Holland, but as the war went on, the Nazis began to take this, whoever was a Jew or had Jewish ancestry, etc., and they began to go through those more peaceful countries. And in 1943, a pastor went over to visit the Postma family. He said, I'd like to come over and have a cup of coffee and just have a chat. Well, when the pastor does that, beware. Okay, beware. And he talked for a while, and then he said, I want to ask you a favor. Could you put somebody up in your house for a while? Of course, the man knew what the pastor was asking. And he said, well, yes, I can do that. And so the pastor arranged for a 20-year-old Jewish girl to live with this family. And think about it. In those times, it wasn't just living in somebody's house. It was a very dangerous one because, you don't know what the kids are going to do. So she couldn't really be seen very much. She had to live without being seen. So it was a very tough way to live for a while. And she lived in that house for about 2.5 years. It was at the end of the war, and so she survived. And the postman, they thought that didn't just was the pastor. He thought there was something from God that he was asked to do that. Some families were not so lucky. The Uli family in Poland, 6 children, 1 in the womb, and they were all sent to the camps because they hid Jews. So they were called to do something very big. And they just were modest people, lived in a modest home. They said there's something bigger than this world. We can't just think about this world. It takes a lot more than that. And we have to gather that wisdom that we hear in our first reading today. Well, those are simple things. But that's simple things, but they are very valuable. And we're called to take that gift that God has given and make it work. And it was actually, this book of the Bible was actually written by a woman, which is very unusual in those days for any book written by a woman to be put in a collection of other books. Just very, very rare that it happened. But, one of the things we want to think about is there's a great wisdom in the feminine. And we should be thinking about that, because in relation to God, we are all feminine. We are receiving the love of God. That's the best thing you or I could do, is to accept the love that God gives us. He pours that out to us, and he gives us that. And in fact, when you go through the Bible and you find the one book that never mentions God, which is which one? Which one? I've done this before. I didn't hear. Song of Songs, yes. Oh. Never mentions God. But there is a marvelous verse in there. Chapter 6, verse 10. It's a love poem, very sensual, and God is the groom, and the people are the bride. When we look at the Bible, that's how the Bible frames that up. So there's God, and then there's us, the bride. If you go to the book of Ephesians, you can see what it talks about. We are the bride of Christ as the church. And the groom, it's dawn, he says, "Who is this at the dawn? As beautiful as the moon, as resplendent as the sun, as awe-inspiring of bannered troops." That's how God sees you and me. That's how he looks at us. And so when we have all these gifts that God has given us, putting them to use is so important, because that's what those kind of people that are as bright as the sun, as beautiful as the moon, resplendent as that's great. It's a wonderful vision. And so God calls us. And yes, some have more talents than others. But that's not an excuse, as we hear in the gospel. It's not an excuse. "Oh, Monsignor, I really don't know," like that. And so we have to kind of maybe listen to this gospel. See, well, even if I think I don't have that much, what about what can I do? How can I put my talents to use? Now, I don't think I'm ever going to have to go to one of your houses and say, can you hide a Jew? I don't think I'd ever have to do that in my lifetime. And I hope it never happens here. But how many would be willing if that was the case? To risk our lives to save another. We have, I think, sometimes gotten way, way on the side of being too safe. Jesus is not safe. He's not. He says, give everything, sell it and give it to the poor. Take up your cross. Love your enemy. He does things like that. That's what he tells us. That's not real safe behavior. But he asks us to do that. He asks us to get out of our comfort zone and to talk to others about God, about the glory of Christ. He tells us to love our enemies. That's a command of God. Those are things that the talents we have that we can put to use. Obviously, God's not going to ask us what kind of gold coins when we stand before him. But how many times have we just were asked to do something, and it was just a little inconvenience, and we said, no. How many times do we encourage our kids to be altar servers? And thank you guys for being over. I mean, we need altar servers. When I was growing up, it was expected that I was an altar server. But, we have to maybe make a small little sacrifice. So many times we're afraid to do that. So this week, and in this whole season, when we begin to get into this whole Thanksgiving and Christmas and all of those wonderful things and all that brings to us, think about what can I do? What talent can I put to use? Sing in the choir. Be an usher. Be an altar server. Get out of your comfort zone. Be a little put out of place. Just got a little inconvenience. Those are the kinds of things God wants. So don't think about, having to hide people in your house. Don't worry about that. Worry about being just a little bit inconvenient to do something for the Lord. And when we do that, we will hear those wonderful words, good and faithful servant.